Hi guys, my name is Hussein Mashayikhi and I hope you are all doing well. I'm back with another video from our Unreal Engine course, and in the previous ones you've learned all about lighting, how to do proper lighting in different settings and using different techniques. And some of you may be troubled by this question: what happens when we don't have windows? And for example, if I close the curtains here in this interior scene for a second, I'm going to show you what to do so you will not have any problems, because when you don't have any source of outside light, it's basically nighttime lighting and you would have to do everything with artificial lights, which is basically what happens in real life as well. So you would light the scene with artificial sources of light like you would do in nighttime, and you would not have any problem because you already learned about different techniques and tips and tricks that could help you do that very nicely. And by the way, if we had like a partial type of light from the outside like this, for example, if the curtains were half closed, all we had to do in that circumstance was to increase the intensity of that outside source of light, and we would get more lights, and we would have to do the rest, like I said, with artificial lights in the inside. So let me just put everything to what it was before. Okay, so this was here and there. So we learned about lighting. In the previous session we learned about quick-sell materials, but in this one we're going to start to learn how to create our own materials from scratch. So we already know that we have a lot of good quality materials and textures with Quixel Bridge, but sometimes we would need to create our own, and that's what we're going to do now. And don't worry about some of the noises that you see right now. When we are learning how to export our files, we're going to learn about Final Gather, and we're going to elevate the quality of our reflections, and we're going to take care of those noises. So don't worry about them just yet. Okay, we're going to learn how to create different materials from scratch. Like I said, for example, we have this type of furniture here. It's one separate material, the steel under the table, this granite, the plants, this like piece of cloth here, this towel, so the concrete and materials that are used in the kitchen, the steel. Every single one of these materials are going to be created from scratch, and we're going to learn how to do that. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to create a folder for it. So we're going to do everything in a very organized manner. So let me just close everything. So inside content, the new folder called content, I'm going to make a new folder, and I'm going to name this material. Okay, let me just material there. Okay, now I'm going to open this folder, go inside it, and create another one called texture. Okay, so I have the texture folder, and what is the texture? Basically, look at this granite, it has a texture on top. This piece of furniture, everything has a texture, and we can change that texture with the material. So I'm going to create another folder. I'm going to call this one shader, and it's gonna have the basic essential parts of my material inside of it. So I have the shader for the basic essential parts of my material, and I have the texture for my texture files, and together I'm going to use these two to create our first material for our scene. So okay, so let's navigate through the scene and find a suitable object to make our first material for. So let me see, maybe something from this side. What I have here is basically a statue, a couple of books. Maybe this is a statue. This statue looks nice. Okay, it looks interesting. Okay, so this would be a good piece to start our material creation process for. And let's begin. So the first thing that I do is to go to the shader folder that I made inside the material folder that I also made. And I'm going to right click and create a material file. I'm going to call it something, maybe plastic. So let me just fix that. I'm going to press F2 on my keyboard, rename it into plastic. Okay, there. So every detail that we're going to apply to our material is going to happen with this file. The roughness, the normals, the color, everything is going to happen with this file, which we just named plastic. So I'm going to double click on it. Okay, Now, as you can see, we have different tabs and windows for the Megan scans. So I'm gonna collapse all of them and maybe close it, okay? But when we are trying to create our own material, we have a different set or a slate. So, all right, now if I click on this parent item that I have here, it's gonna look exactly like what we had with the Mega scans, folders and tabs and windows. So later on, when I'm done with my material, I can make it appear with the same tabs and windows that we had with the Mega scans and the other materials that we always imported or used from a library. So don't worry about that. Okay, now, so in this part, I'm going to compare the material slate that we get inside Unreal, what we can see right now, with what we had or have with 3ds Max, regardless of whether it's Corona materials or V-Ray materials or even Arnold. So I'm gonna show you how these material slates are kind of different, and we have to operate differently with them. So they have similarities. So for example, we have this slate and you have this tab, but with Unreal Engine, you only get to have one single material on your slate. Whereas inside, for example, the material editor for 3ds Max, you can have different types of material present simultaneously. One of them can be glass, the other can be concrete, anything. So let me just pin this shader, add it to my favorites. So anytime that I want to do something with it, it's there. So I'm going to add this to my favorites. I'm going to right click on it and choose add to favorites. So anytime that I want to use it, I don't have to navigate through all of these different options. So I'm going to close everything else. So only my favorites is here, and I can access everything very quickly. I have base color, metallic, specular, roughness, all these different options with my material tab, and anywhere I click on this slate, it's gonna, it's just one simple material. It doesn't really matter whether I click on the tab or the slate. So I have the details panel on the left. However, I can dock it to the right, and from this right side with this search box, I can just search for any command or option that I may want to use, and I can just drag it with the left mouse click onto my slate and just link it to any of these options that I have for my main material tab. For example, I can just drag this one, put it on my slate, and then link it. And to cut this link and disable it, all I have to do is to just press down Alt on my keyboard and click on that option. So I can just sever that link as easily as that, and I can just even right click on this tab and use the search box and use anything that I want and just search for the term and just use the link. Okay, so it's very simple to work with. And I can even use this option. If I right click on this tab, it has connect to base color, for example, and I can just use that. So I can do everything manually, or I can use these right click menus. And by the way, you cannot delete this main tab. So anytime you press delete, it's not going to be deleted and it's going to be present. And any changes that you make, you have to use this apply button and save it before it takes effect. So remember that. All right, let's discuss these options. The first one is called base color, which is basically the diffuse color or the albedo color that we have in other software. And here I can just put a texture or choose a color for my material. So, all right, I'm going to start telling you about how to use a color. But before that, let me just do something. So we're going to go to the shader folder, and then we're going to drag this shader file, plastic, into our object so that anything that we do is applied to it. Right now, it doesn't really have any special color or texture. It's just a simple black base color with nothing for our material. So if we go back to the slate, if, for example, we want to start by using a very simple black and white color for our base color, we can go to this right panel that we talked about and add a node. For example, let me just find the one. It's called constant. So if you want to use a black and white color, all you have to do is to just drag this constant node. Okay, once you drag this item into your slate, it becomes a node. It's called a node. So that's what we're going to do. We drag this constant node here. Okay, another way we can just add this node is to just right click on the slate and search for constant. Okay, let me just type it correctly, constant, and there. Okay, so I can just add it with this method as well. It even has a keyboard shortcut, so all you have to do is just press 1 on the keyboard and left click on the slate, and you can just add it that way as well. So let me just delete everything. We only need 1. It may be a little bit surprising to you at this stage, but this constant, this black and white node is going to be one of the most frequently used nodes that we use in our own projects. So in terms of color, it can be either black or white or any color like a grayish color in between. So by changing the value, we can get different colors between 0 and white. So let me just link this to my base color there, okay? So right now, the value is at 0, as you can see, and it's just black, okay? It's the blackest black that it can be. If I put 1 here, it's just white. So that was the shadow. So basically, it's just pure white. And if I change this value to other numbers, we're gonna get other colors in between. For example, this is what 0.5 looks like. 0.1, okay, so it's kind of grayish. 0.05, okay, darker. So if I hit apply with this one and save it and go back to my object, you can see that it just applied and we get a slightly different color than the first original black that we had. All right, now for testing and demonstration purposes, I'm gonna make a couple of copies of this object and put them right beside each other, okay? 3 would be fine. So if you go back to our slate, I'm going to put this color value at 1 again and save and apply it, okay? So that everything, all these objects would be white for now. Let's just check, okay? And I'm gonna duplicate this material file also, call it plastic1, double click on it and open it, okay? Put the value for this one, 0.5, apply, okay? So if we drag this into this other object and make a duplicate of it, again, put a value of, for example, 0.05, darker, hit apply, go back and drag this one into this other one on the left, okay? So they have different colors now. From right to left, we have pure white, kind of gray and darker gray color that we just used. So this constant node, as you just watched, can give us any color between the colors of white and black. And the more the value of this color is closer to 0, it's gonna be darker and closer to black. And the more it's close to 1, it's gonna be brighter and closer to white. Okay. Okay, so let's move on. So before that, I'm going to delete all these extra material files that we just created. Let me just close these and delete these 2 plastic 1 and 2. We don't need them anymore. All right, so now, if you have been paying attention, anytime that we change the value or the color, we had to hit apply and save and go back and forth between this slate and basically the viewport. Now, we can have an option to just see our changes instantly without having to apply and save, and that's going to happen with this tab here. So we're going to learn how to do that now. If we right click on this tab and choose convert to parameter, and we can just choose a name for it too. For example, I'm going to call this color. Okay, so okay, and what I have to do now is just to close this slate. We don't need it for now. Let's just save everything. And now we have to go back to the content browser and right click on our material file and choose create material instance. Okay, and now if we drag this into our object like so, okay, now if I double click on it, I get this window that looks exactly like the Megascans material. So we have all these parameters available here, and it's like a quick sell material. So right now I can choose choose this color, enable it, and use any value that I want for this parameter that I just made. So if I put 0.2, it's kind of gray, 0.01, it's darker, and everything's just quicker this way. So we just created our own material, our own parameter. We call that color, and we get to see the changes instantly happen in real time to the object without going back and forth and saving and applying everything in our material slate. All right, let's go back to our parent section, and any changes that we make with our material on that slate is going to be applied to this instance material as well. So if I create a metallic parameter like so, and I'm gonna call this one metallic, okay, metallic. Now I'm going to choose a value for it and save. Okay, let's just save it first. All right, so if I go to the instance, I can see this metallic parameter added, and if I make any changes, the changes again will be applied instantly. So any changes or any new parameters is going to be there, and if I delete it and save it, we're not going to have that parameter anymore in our instance. So everything is easier this way. All right, let's move on to the next part. If we press 2 on our keyboard, we have two colors. We have R and G, so red and green basically. So if I choose 1 for my red, so we have this red color here, and we can just save it. And if we go back to the main right now, we can see that our object is turning red. I can double click on the plastic file again. This time I'm going to put a value of 1 for green or G. And if we save this and go back to main, you can see that it's now a green color. Okay. And I can even make or define a parameter for this as well. For example, I'm gonna make a parameter called color2. Color2. I'm gonna name this color2. And if I just hit apply and go back to my content browser, okay, and open it up, if I check it, you can see that I can just change the color with this button here, and I can just change the values for R and G and change the color this way as well. Okay, so this is also a useful way to work with this. We talked about the number 1 on the keyboard, number 2. Now let's talk about number 3 on the keyboard. With number 3, we can have 3 colors. Okay, so if I link this into my base color, okay, like so, and open it up, double click on it, I can just change the color. I have the 3 values of R, G, and B. Okay, and I'm making a parameter for this one called color. I hit apply, go back to my content browser, and then I double click on my instance, and if I check color, I can change the values of RGB, and I can change the color to any color that I want. All right, so by making parameters, we can just make everything more accessible and easy, and so far we've learned about colors. Next, we're going to learn about textures. Okay, so let me just delete this color parameter. We don't need it anymore. We're going to talk about textures now. So we have different ways of adding a texture into our workspace. We can just go to Megascans and use the textures that we have. We can right click and import textures from our hard disk, or we can go to our hard disk on Windows and just drag a texture into one of these folders. Okay, so I'm going to do that, but before, let me just take a look at my folders, make everything neat and organized. Let's see what my favorite folders are. Okay, so I have a shader with plastic. Okay, so let me just take a look at everything real quick so that I know where everything is placed. This texture folder here is suitable for my plastic demonstration. Okay, so I'm going to drag this into this texture folder. It's here. Okay, so my texture is ready. Let me just rename it real quick. You don't need to do this. So I'm going to call this 00, for example, 52. And I'm going to drag it into my slate like so. Let me just grab it. Okay, put it here. And we don't need this window anymore. So I'm going to close this window. All we need is here, texture sample. Another way of adding this texture sample tab into your slate is by doing a right click and in search for texture sample, and then just add that to your slate. Alternatively, I can just hold down T on my keyboard and do a left click on the slate and add another texture sample. Now these two new texture samples don't have any actual texture in them, so if I link one of them into my plastic, I get an error. So to resolve that, all I have to do is just click on them, okay, select them, and go to this panel, material expression texture base, and choose 0052 texture, or search for that. It's here. Now I can just select it, and if I link this texture sample again to the plastic, I don't get an error because it has a texture now. But the easiest method is just to go to this texture and drag it into the slate. Now let's move on. If I double click on this texture, open it up. Okay, let me just make this bigger. I also get this right detail panel with brightness, brightness curve, and saturation, and some of these items I've talked about before. You can just change these items to whatever value that you want, and you can just revert it back to what it was. Now remember, if you were using the same texture somewhere else for another value or element, let me just demonstrate that real quick. I drag another one into my slate, link it to roughness, and now if you make any changes here, it's going to be applied to both of these texture samples. Okay, so remember that. Now, if you didn't want the changes to be reflected in other similar texture samples, you gotta make a duplicate. Okay, so remember that also. All right, now let me just delete this extra one, and let me just save and apply this texture and go to our viewport and see how our object looks. Okay, so the texture is applied now. This is what it looks like. And the way it looks is based on the UV map that it has, or the unwrapping that it has, that has been done for this object. Now you may think that you would want to change the size of this texture, make the tiles look smaller or bigger. Now, if you wanted to do something like that, you have to go to this plastic material file in the content browser, double click on it. Okay, so that we go into the material slate. Okay, now you have to do a right click and search for coordinates. So we have this item called texture coordinate, which is a very frequently used item even in V-Ray with 3ds Max. You can just drag one, add one into your slate and use that to change the size of your texture and change the size and also the tiling of the texture. So we get these options, UV tiling, and so if you link this node into UV for your texture sample, now you can change the size. And for example, let me just put 3 and 3 for the size. Okay, I'm not gonna apply it just yet, just take a look. Now notice the differences. Let me just apply and go back. Okay, so it became smaller, the patterns, the tiling. If I make this 10 in 10, for example, apply again, this time it's even smaller. It's gotta be smaller. Take a look there, very small. All right, so by adding a texture coordinate and linking it to our texture sample, we can just change the details for our UV and tiling. So, okay, the quality of your textures matter a lot. So make sure that you use a very high quality texture. This texture coordinate cannot be made into a parameter just yet. We're gonna talk about that later on. But for now, I'm going to introduce a resource to you to download any texture that you want, 3dtextures.me, with the address up here. So you can use this resource and download almost any texture that you want for your works. They have high quality textures, so make sure that you use a very good quality texture for your work. Okay, so as you can see, we have many textures here. We have different categories. Okay, wall, for example. And you can just download everything and just use it. Okay, so we talked about how we can have a color or a texture for our base color. So let me just delete these texture sample and coordinates real quick. Now I'm going to add a simple color and link it to my base color. Let me just choose it, maybe this color. All right, let's talk about the next item, which is metallic. So basically any object that I have, any material that I have, can either be a metal or not. Okay, it can either have metal-like features or not. For example, steel is a metal, okay, but fabric or concrete is not. All right, now generally, if we had a material for an object which was metal and it also was reflective, we have to put a value of 1 for it. And vice versa, if it was not a metal and if it wasn't reflective, we have to put a value of 0 for it. And also, in terms of color, if the metallic value in terms of color is black, it means that it's not a metallic object. But if it's a white color for our metallic, it means that it's a very reflective material and it has metallic-like features. Now to add this black and white color for our metallic, all we have to do is to just press down 1 on the keyboard and left click on the slate, and we get this black and white value, and we can just change it and link it to our metallic and have any type of metallic feature that we want by changing this value. Right now with the value at 0, it means that it's not metallic at all. If I put 1, it's the most metallic that it can be, and it's very reflective. So if I hit apply and go back to our object, you can see that it's reflective and resembles a metal-like material. And we can later on tamper with the glossiness as well, but for now let me just apply this metallic quality to this other object. Okay, so it resembles a metal reflective object. Okay, and if I put, for example, 0.1 for the value, it will have half of that metallic effect. So if I hit apply and go back to my viewport, you can see that it kind of lost some of its metallic look. Now, to better understand metallic, we can talk about also roughness, which is basically a feature that lets us determine the amount or extent of the opacity for our material. Okay. All right. So inside Unreal and some other 3D software, we believe that any type of object that we have has a degree of reflectiveness. And in terms of color, if we choose black for our roughness, it means that that object would resemble a mirror and we can just see ourselves in that object. It's very reflective. On the contrary, if we put white in terms of color for roughness, it means that that object is not that reflective at all, and it's like concrete or parquet floors. When we look at them, we cannot see ourselves. Okay. All right, so if I add a black and white color here by pressing 1 on my keyboard and doing a left click on the slate like so and link it into my roughness, and now we can change the value. So if the value is at 0, it's at its most reflective. So if I hit apply and go back to our scene, you can see that it's very reflective. It's almost like a mirror. Okay. So this is what it looks like with roughness put at 0. Let's find another object, for example, this one, and add it to this. You can see that it's very reflective. It reflects the nearby objects. Okay, let's look at it from this angle. You can see the backside, the walls, the windows, the plants, everything in this kind of bowl. Okay, and something to remember is that if you're using baked lights for your project, achieving these types of reflections could be a little troubling, but we can achieve that easily with Lumen. All right. Okay, let me just close down my 3ds Max software. It's slowing down my Unreal a little, so let me just close down these 3D Max windows, and let's resume our discussion. Now, the more I change this value for roughness from 0 to 1, or in terms of color from black to white, the less reflective my material gets. So if I make a parameter out of this and call it something, okay, so let's call it ROU, and let's go back, hit apply. Let's go back to our main, and I double click on my plastic instance and check the box for ROU. I can change the value and you can see the changes instantly. So as I increase this number, it gets less and less reflective, and you can see that clearly in this bowl. Now I can show you the same effect with this object here. Okay, so I apply it to this object. Let's change the angle and look at the changes. So I put 0.5, see the changes, 0.2, 0.1, and 1, not reflective at all. Okay. And for certain materials like fabric that do not have any reflections in real life at all, we put the roughness value at 1. And we put 0 for mirror-like objects that are very reflective. Okay, so far we learned that 0 means very reflective, 1 means not reflective at all, and in terms of color, white is 1, not reflective at all, and 0 is black, which is very reflective. I want to make a copy of this and have another one of these black and white colors, and let's just make another one, link it to metallic. Now if I put the value at 1, which means very metallic, if we go back to this object, you can see how much it resembles a metal that is very reflective too. Okay, now let's see if I change the color into a golden like color. So let me just make a parameter of this color too, so that we can see the changes in real time. Call this color, hit apply, and go back into our main. Now let's open it up enable color, change the color from this color to something like a golden. And if I click OK, we get this beautiful look for our object. So let me just quickly recap what we did here. So we put the roughness at 0. Okay, so the roughness is at 0. Let me just show you, it's here. Okay, and also we put the metallic at 1 and also chose a golden color for it. So you can have this color and have the color code if you wanted to use the same color somewhere else. That is one way of doing it. So it was very simple, and we can just change the color to another color that suits our atmosphere better. For example, a copper color, something like this. And it's just basically a matter of preference. Both colors looked all right. And to make it further resemble copper, I can just change the roughness. For example, put 0.1 or 2. Look at it. See how much more realistic it got? Beautiful. And if you go to the other object at the other side of the apartment here, it changed too. This one changed too, resembles copper now. And it's very easy. Now, if you wanted to use textures instead of color values, how would we go about doing it? Instead of these roughness, metallic, and base color, how would we put textures, black and white textures, that could just achieve the same effect for us? For example, if I put a black and white texture in my roughness, wherein the texture is black is going to be glossy and reflective, and wherein the texture is white is going to be opaque. Okay, I'm going to show you how that works. I go to this folder. Let's see. I'm trying to find a certain black and white texture that I think I saved. So let me just check a few of these folders, a few of these materials that I previously put here. And if they were not here, I would go to the mega scans. So bear with me. Let's see. Okay, we can go to the mega scans folder and see if we have anything interesting here. Maybe this one, but this one is not black and white. So even if we do it with this one, it's not gonna work out that well. And it would be better if we just download something from the internet, a black and white texture instead of this one, and use it for our demonstration. So let me just double check real quick if I have that texture that I want to work with right now. All right, so I give up. I'm going to use a texture of my own, something that I have on my hard disk. Let's find one, choose one. This could work. Now, if I link this texture into my roughness, wherein the texture is really black is going to be very reflective and glossy, and wherein the texture is really white is going to be opaque. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to drag this texture into my Unreal Engine, but before that, let me just dock this content browser so that it's just here, and I want to put it inside the texture folder. I can just right click and import, but I also can drag the texture from my Windows folder into my content browser inside Unreal. So I'm going to select a couple of these different texture maps and use them for our demonstration purposes. Okay, so we have these 4 to work with. I'm going to start with this one, drag it into my slate, minimize this window, and link this into my roughness. All right, it's time to see what it looks like. So if we apply it and go back to our objects, let's see. Okay, we can see some places glossier than others in this object, and in this one it's more apparent. So in some places we have some opacity, and in some others we have a reflectiveness. Let's check this one. All right, let me just change the angle. See, in this patch, in this part, we have some reflectiveness and opacity at the other parts. And I can even convert this texture sample into a parameter. Let's call it text, for example. Okay, and go back to the main, apply. Now I can just change it instantly and see the differences, check the differences. So I enable check, use another one. Okay, this one's slightly different, another map. Let's check out those 2 objects on the other side. Let me zoom in. Okay, and I can even change it to another one. Okay, and another one. Different patterns for the places that are opaque and reflective. Now remember that roughness is one of the most frequently used and one of the most important elements that you can have in any material. So it's very important to have it, and use the right value or the texture for your roughness. Okay, so now we understood better what it meant to use a texture for roughness. We can do the same thing with metallic. I mean, use the texture, the same texture even for the metallic, and have kind of similar effects in terms of metal-like features. So let's go back to the main, hit apply, of course, go back to the main. All right, see, in some parts and patches it resembles a metal, and in some parts and patches it doesn't. Let's go back to that big object here, this object that I have here. You can see things more clearly in this. Usually we don't really use a texture for metallic like this, but more so for roughness. All right, let's move on and start talking about the specular. Okay, so I add a simple black and white texture into my roughness and another one for specular. And then I convert both of them into parameters, call them SPE, and this other one, sorry, let me just do everything from the top. Let's just tidy up the slate. So I want to press 1 on my keyboard and left click, so I get this black and white tab, and I link it into my roughness and specular. I convert one of them into a parameter, call it ROU. The other one also convert to parameter, call this one SPE. All right, apply. Let's now just go to our main and start working on specular. Okay, so let me just rotate this slightly, and then I'm going to double click on this plastic instance that we have. Check the roughness. The value is at 0. I'm going to keep it at 0, but it has to be really reflective and glossy right now, which it isn't, and that's a problem. So I'm going to try to find a problem. Let's just go back to the slate real quick, see everything is linked correctly, roughness and specular. Let's just go back and again drag it into my object. Let's try again. What if I put 1 here for testing purposes? Nothing changes. So this one is kind of problematic. I'm going to delete it, get rid of it, make a duplicate out of this original plastic file that I have, add this to my object, and then okay, I think I made a simple mistake here. Instead of duplicating the plastic file, I should create a material instance. So let me just delete this, right click on the original one, create a material instance, drag it into my object, and also double click on it, go to roughness, make sure it's enabled. It's at 0 right now. Again, I do not see the reflectiveness and the glossiness that I want, and it should have, so there's a problem somewhere. Okay, so this time I'm gonna delete both of them, okay, and create everything from scratch, make a new file, new material file. Let's leave it at new material name, go to the slate. Let me just create these black and white tabs here, a couple of them, one to roughness, one linked to specular, another one linked to my base color. The one for the base color is a 3-color combo like we talked about, so maybe select red for it at this time. Convert these into parameters. So the one for the specular, I'm going to call it as PE, the one for roughness, ROU, and okay, so we have 2 parameters to apply, and go back to the main, create a material instance, add this into my object, drag it into my object, double click on it, and now let's go and see what happens. Again, we have this problem. So I think the problem lies with a specular. So right now it's at 0. Let me just put 1 there. Okay, so the problem is that if the specular is at 0, the roughness is not going to take effect. So when we put it at 1, the roughness also shows its effect. So I put the roughness at 0.5. Now, what happens if I increase this specular number? It adds a kind of light sphere on top of our material like this. So we have some kind of light sphere effect on this object. If I put a small value like 0.1, it's gonna have less than effect, and if I put 1 or anything above 1, it's gonna have the same effect. And so if I change the roughness, for example, to 0.02, the object becomes more reflective, and you can see the differences with the specular as well. All right, so remember that any specular value above 1 is not gonna affect anything, so it's going to be the same as having 1 there. So let me just show you something else. I need a bigger and a more reflective object, in my scene. Let me see what I can do with this. Maybe another one. Let me just take a look. I want to show you something. So let me just use this object. Okay. First, I need to drag this instance material into this object. Okay. And I'm going to apply the same material instance into this other object here that I have. This one, let me just rotate it real quick. And I drag this one instance into this material. Okay, I'll double click on it, go to roughness, choose a bigger value, maybe 0.5 to see the effects of a specular better. So right now the specular is at 1. You can see some glowy light effects on the object. If I make it smaller, you can see less of that. So the more I increase a specular from 0 to 1, the more we will be able to see these light particles or light glowy effects on our objects. Okay, you can see it in the center of this head shape figure. Now if I decrease this specular value, you will have less of that glowy light particle effect on your object. Okay, so that's what we had to learn about specular, so we can move on to the rest of these items. Okay, the next one in our list is anisotropy, which we don't really have much use for right now. So the next one is emissive color. We're going to talk about emissive color for now. So let me just delete these. And basically we use emissive color for materials that are supposed to have some kind of light in them. So I press down 1 on my keyboard and do a left click on my slate. I link this into my emissive color. Now I want to add a value, for example 0.5, and alternatively I can put it at 0.1 or 1, and you can see the differences. And if I put it at 20, you can see how much light is emitted from this object here. So I apply it, go back to our main, see, they are almost resembling a source of light, and they're emitting a lot of light from them. And now if I put a similar material in a darker place like this place, and I apply this emissive quality to it, you can see how much light is being emitted from this object. And I can similarly convert this into a parameter too. So if I choose a name, for example, light, apply it, go back to the main. Okay, so let me just put everything, let me just make this smaller, make this window smaller. So go back to the main, have this window here. Now all I have to do is to just check this light and change its value, 50 for example, or I put 1 for it. Okay, notice the differences. All right, so we learned about this one, but now let me tell you something about bloom, the bloom effect in post-process. So it's interesting. So let me just search for post-process here. Okay, search for post-process so I can find it quicker and go to bloom. If you can remember, in the past sessions, I told you to disable bloom. So let me just zoom in on this object. Now I'm going to show you what happens if I enable bloom. So I go to my post process to bloom, it's enabled, change the number from 0 to a bigger one. And you can see how much more light is emitted from this object, but be careful because if you just use this with a very high value, it's gonna mess up your lighting in the other parts of the building. So 0.2 would be good right now, and I think 0.1 for example would be a better value. Now later on I'm going to explain to you how to change this color, the color of this emissive light. Okay, for example, have a warmer light for this object. Okay, we're going to learn that together later on. So if you press M on the keyboard and do a left click, you get this tab here. And if you link this color into this tab, A and B, and the light also, so you combine them and put them for your emissive color. Right now you have both the emissive effect and the color. So if you apply it, go back. Now you have some color for your kind of bloom effect or emissive effect as well. So this was the quick way to do it. And if you check the other objects that have the same instance material, you can see that this effect is applied to them as well. Let me just delete everything. And now I want to use another texture to explain something else on the list, which is normal. So let me just find that and drag it into the slate, link it into my base color. It's a fabric. I'm gonna put the roughness at 1 because we do not want any reflections at all. It's a fabric after all. So right now we're going to start talking about normals. So what this normal element does, which is very important, is to create some bumps or bumpy areas on top of the surface of our material. So I'm going to show you in a couple of seconds what that looks like. So let me just apply this material. And now we can just use a texture for our normal element. We should have some specific textures for our bumps and normal maps. So I'm going to try to find one that is suitable for our work here. So let me just see if I have the right one. I want to search for it, fabric. Let's see, this one. I drag it into my slate and I double click on it so that you can see what it looks like. You can see all these points on this texture, these bump points. Now I link this texture into my normal and I save it. Okay. Now go back to main and you can start to see some small bumps or some type of bumpy texture, fabric-like quality on this object. Now you may want to control this bumpiness, this normal element. And like the previous elements that we talked about, you can simply do that by adding another node into your slate and linking it to this normal that we have here. So what we have to do is to just right click on the slate and search for flatten normal. Okay, it's this one here. So I drag one into my slate. Now what I have to do is to just link result into normal and link our RGB from texture sample into normal from flatten normal like this. And now to control this flatten part, we need to create one of these binary 0-1 tabs and link it to flatten. And we can just choose a value for it. If I click on it and convert it to parameter, call this normal. Okay, it will be easier. So I apply it and save. Go back to the main. I'm going to show you what it does. So I click on this instance. Let me just close this one and put this to the right so that I can see it. Click on normal, change the value from 0 to 1, for example. Okay, bump here, 2, even thicker bumps. And we can just change this, make this bigger. And now if we compare the object to what it was before, it's a lot bumpier and rougher. Okay, so put 5, maybe 0, 0.1. And I even can put like a negative value, like -50, for example, but I'm going to try this one with another object. Let's find a bigger one, something that would show this better. Maybe this piece of furniture. Okay, see how rough and bumpy it looks. Put 5, now compare 2, see? Now you may even want to change the size of this fabric-like texture, and for that, like I said before, you can go to your slate, search for coordinate and use this texture coordinate, add 1 here and link it once to the UV, okay, here, and another time to the UV for the normal texture sample that I made. All right, now if I change the UV numbers like 3, let's apply and see the differences. There, see, they became smaller. Okay, this time I'm going to make them 5 and 5 and click on apply. Again, compare the differences. Let's go back to main. See, it became even smaller. And now if I double click on it, this time I want to change the normals. So if I put 10, too much, maybe 5. Yeah, a little bit better. Okay, I save it, go back. All right, something to remember is that the lighting in your scene and your shadows are very important when looking at normals. So if your scene is not properly lit, you may not be able to notice the bumpiness and these normals differences in your scene. So pay attention to that. Okay, so that is how we create a unique material with all of these different nodes. And right now what I want to do is to tell you what happens if we use a simple black and white texture, not a specific normal or bump texture. So let me just find one and show you quickly what I mean. Maybe this one, and let's see, maybe not this one, maybe this one also. Okay, so we have a black and white texture like this. I'm going to find another one. Let's see. Let's check this one. Yeah, I'm going to drag this into my Unreal viewport. Okay, so I have a problem here. It was auto saving, so that was a problem. So let me just do it real quick. Let me just drag this texture again inside Unreal. It was this one. Okay, so we have two textures, one for bumps and another one for base color. Let me just locate my material folder as well so that we don't lose it. Okay, it's this one. Okay, so it's this shader folder. I double click on it. So this was the previous texture that I used, so I want to delete it, and this time I want to use these two black and white textures, so I drag them into my slate. Okay, make everything orderly. So I put this one for my base color, link it. Okay, and this one for my normals. So I delete these as well, link it to my normal directly. And nothing really happens this way because this is not the specific normal map texture that I want. So what I have to do is to just convert this into a normal map, and I can do this with the help of a height map. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is to just search for normal from height map, this one. Okay, normal from height map. I drag one and I link it into my normal, link the texture sample from RGB to this height map that I have. But right now it doesn't let me link it, and what I have to do right now is to just search for another node. This one is called texture object or object texture. So search for it, object texture. So it's texture object. Okay, so I add this into my slate, and now it already has this texture that I selected because I had selected it for the previous node. But if you couldn't find it, you can just find by the name of the texture. So that's what you have to do. It's this one here. Look at the name and come back here. Look for the same name from this list. Okay, so it's this one, and you can select it this way. Now you link this into your height map. Let me just do it. Okay, so I deleted the previous one. Now we can see some bumpiness in this object. How can we change the size? Normal map intensity. So if I create a simple value node, I'll link it to the normal map intensity. I can simply convert this into a parameter, call it normal. Okay, apply it, and go back to the main. Now I'm going to show you what happens. So if I click on this instance that I just had made, now take a look at this piece of furniture. See, the size is just too big. It's too bumpy. It's kind of unrealistic. So let's go back and search for coordinate like we used to. You have to link it once to this texture sample up here, and another one to this coordinate that you have here for your normal. Okay, so you have to link it twice. Pay attention to that, like so. Okay, all right, so everything's ready. Let's just change the size and see what happens. Go to this texture coordinates, put the 10 in 10 size, apply it, go back to the main and check it. See, it became a lot smaller. The patterns are more beautiful and more realistic now. And now if I put this on the right, I can change the normal value. For example, 1, maybe let's change it to 20. Okay, look at the bumps. All right, you can notice the bumpiness, and I can put 1 again. Okay, more flat, and you can experiment with different numbers until you get what you want, but don't overdo and exaggerate because it's gonna look unrealistic. Now finally, I want to convert this coordinate into a parameter. So what I do is to press M on my keyboard and left click on the slate to make this multiply tab or node. We have A and B. A is going to be multiplied into B. All right, so let me sever some of these links, the previous links. Okay, we don't need these anymore. Okay, we're going to do something else. So this time I'm going to link this coordinate into A, for example, into this multiply node, and then from multiply 1 to texture sample, and another one into coordinate from our normal map. Okay, so if this is hard to remember, please take some notes. So in order to make a parameter out of your coordinate, you need a multiplier node, okay? And this is how you need to link these. Now press 1 and create one of these and link it to B. For this one, we're going to convert this into a parameter, call it, for example, something like tile. So tile, okay. Now I need to apply it. Go back to main, and then I double click on my instance, go to tile, click on it, check it, and change the value. We can try 10, 20, maybe 100, and let's check it out. It's too difficult to see, it's too small, so I need to go the other way, in the other direction. So I choose a very small number so that we can see the patterns, okay? 0.1, 0.5, better 0.9, maybe 2, or maybe 1, which is apparently a good number here. See? Okay, so this is basically how we converted the coordinate node into a parameter, okay? All right, so we learned about some of the materials and how to create them, how to work with different elements and nodes in that material slate. We haven't talked about glass, for example. We're gonna learn about that later on in the future sessions. For now, make sure that you practice what you've learned so far, and I hope you've enjoyed this session, and I will see you in the next one.